Hello, and welcome to Module 7, Cultural Inclusivity. What is cultural inclusivity, and why is it relevant to a field team? Have you had the opportunity to work with a diverse group of researchers? Maybe people from different regions within your country or from different countries. Have you noticed any differences in the work or communication styles of researchers from different cultural backgrounds? Think back on a time when you noticed differences in social or professional interactions that you attributed to cultural differences. Maybe the interaction was enlightening, like learning and participating in a cultural holiday that you had never been exposed to. Or maybe you stereotyped or unintentionally judged someone because they behaved or approached things differently than what you are accustomed to. Field teams that bring together people from different regions will be enriched by cultural diversity and may also need to navigate cultural differences that may lead to challenges in communication or expectations. Cultural differences can present themselves in a wide range of ways, and how people interact with cultural differences can depend on their own lived experiences. Cultural differences can also influence interactions at the team level. Let's look at a gradient of the impact that interactions based on cultural differences have on individuals or teams. Some interactions may be enlightening, like trying for the first time and enjoying pickled herring from a Swedish colleague, or being invited to join a Lunar New Year festival by a Chinese colleague. Other interactions can be harmful, like machismo, which is an exaggerated sense of masculinity that can be aggressive or dominant, while yet other interactions can exist somewhere between being enlightening and harmful. For example, if you're someone who considers eye contact important for engagement, it may be difficult to communicate with someone else brought up in a culture where direct eye contact is considered disrespectful. Before we begin to understand how these cultural differences influence interactions and impact us and our teams, we need to first understand what culture is and what factors influence our norms and behaviors. Then we will discuss how culture and cultural differences show up in the field and how they can influence our field team dynamics and environments. There are many ways to define culture. Here we define culture as a collection of learned and shared behaviors, beliefs, and values that a group of people from a specific region identify with and act upon. Culture plays out in many facets of life, such as language, religion, class, family traditions, customs, education, the arts, history, technology, and many others. Consider your own culture. What language do you speak at home or with your family? What foods do you typically eat? Cultural groups often have both generalizations and stereotypes attached to them, and it's important to understand how these differ. When considering cultural groups or people from a similar cultural background, it can be helpful to create generalizations, where people within a cultural group can be characterized as having a shared culture. While cultural generalizations can help build awareness and help prepare us for potential interactions with people from a particular cultural background, stereotypes are often linked to bias, implicit or explicit. These stereotypes can lead to intentional or unintentional judgment, harm, and/or discrimination of others. Whereas individuals from the same cultural group may have similar characteristics because of their shared culture, it is important to recognize that individuals are unique and shaped by their own life experiences, including relationships with other people from within and from outside their culture. Cultures also change over time, so our assumption that two individuals from the same place or cultural group have similar beliefs or behaviors may be misguided. People can hold cultural and personal habits, values, and experiences that influence how they understand and navigate the world. Some examples of these factors include their identities, whether that is race, gender, sexuality, or others we discussed in Module 6. National culture, something that is shared within a country. The regions in which they were born within a country. For example, within the United States, each state and region has its own cultural influences. Generational culture is another example, passed down by family members and traditions, as well as workplace culture. For example, corporate versus academic professional training. We can take this a step further by identifying affinity groups that share beliefs, behaviors, or traits within these layers of culture. For example, if we were to consider hiking, groups who participate regularly in backcountry hiking may have different sets of behaviors and expectations or cultures than groups that organize day hikes. Yet individuals within these groups may all identify as hikers. Let's consider some layers of culture and affinity groups. Does your family share or still practice an activity that has been passed down through generations? What kind of affinity groups do you identify with? Think about where you grew up, for example. Are you from the West or East Coast? Maybe from the South or Midwest? If you're not from the United States, are there affinity groups or smaller cultures from your country that you identify with? These layers of culture and groups within contribute to people having unique values, norms, and behaviors, even when individuals share the same larger cultural background. Norms and behaviors that are influenced by these layers can manifest in a variety of ways, such as how a person leads a team or how they communicate with others. Maybe they're direct in their requests, or maybe they frame requests as questions. Consider how your cultural background influences your behaviors and norms. How do you prefer to communicate? Maybe you're assertive, passive, analytical. What is your leadership style? How do you think the way you were raised and culture influence your communication and leadership styles, in particular in a field environment? When we are out in the field, there are so many ways that different cultures show up in interactions and how they influence our working environment. Different cultures may be found amongst anyone on a field team, from field team participants, contractors, or crew members, to support and logistics staff. For example, members of your team may come from different institutions or scientific sectors, such as a government lab. Maybe you have team members who are joining from different countries. Or maybe you are conducting ship-based research on a military vessel with service members. The location of the field site and the communities in or around the field site also influence our environment and provide different cultural contexts. You and your team will interact with local communities within their own cultural context, who will have their own expectations of their interactions with you and your team. For example, when conducting fieldwork on tribal lands with tribal communities, you will be expected to follow and respect community norms of engagement and tribal sovereignty. All these examples of ways in which cultural differences can show up in the field, whether they're from individuals or the surrounding environment, will influence team dynamics and interactions, somewhere along the gradient of influence that we explored earlier. As we discussed in Module 6, diversity among the field team is important in creating a welcoming environment and keeping people safe. Cultural differences can strengthen our teams and enrich our research and fieldwork by bringing in new and unique perspectives from personal lived experiences. Even people from similar cultural backgrounds can show different behaviors and norms, enhancing the social and scientific interactions within the team. When cultural differences with harmful or difficult impacts are not addressed, for example, machismo, the consequences may include misunderstandings, disruption in work and professional relationships, an unsafe team culture, or harmful incidents. Also, when we ignore cultural differences, we can create a space where team members feel isolated, unheard, unsupported, and even disrespected. Building cultural inclusivity and growing awareness of the influence of cultural differences on our field experiences is important, in particular for field teams, because it helps promote a welcoming and inclusive space and helps prevent cultural misunderstandings within the team and the surrounding environment. In this module, our learning objectives are to provide the background knowledge and concepts needed to understand cultural inclusivity, develop tools and strategies to build our awareness of how to foster cultural inclusivity, and finally, to apply both the discussed knowledge and tools to identify and navigate cultural differences in the field. In our next lesson, we will work on understanding cultural inclusivity and the processes for improving cultural inclusivity. We'll see you there.